Have you ever witnessed a brilliance so pure, so extraordinary, that it felt like watching starlight vanish into daylight, completely unnoticed by the world? Have you ever been that person, gifted, capable, burning with quiet passion, yet cloaked in invisibility to those who hold the power to change your life? Have you ever wondered what it might take to finally break free from the background, to stop being a footnote in someone else's story and instead become the headline of your own? Patriots, the new high story, and what happens next will remind you of the kind of strength that doesn't roar, but endures, of the kind of courage that doesn't announce itself, but chooses every day not to give up. It's a story of how the smallest, most overlooked person can become the spark that changes everything. It's a gray Monday morning in Boston, where the towering spires of Novaluma Pharmaceuticals stretch into the sky like sharpened ambitions. The sunlight catches on the mirrored glass of the skyscrapers, scattering brilliance across the city below. Inside these halls of hope and high stakes, where the future of medicine is shaped in whispered breakthroughs and billion-dollar innovations, June Halley walks through the lobby like a ghost with a heartbeat. Around her, the lobby pulses with movement and intellect. Scientists in pristine lab coats discuss molecular pathways with the urgency of those racing time itself. Executives in sleek suits murmur over merger strategies and regulatory pathways. Visiting professors from Harvard and MIT exchange rapid-fire theories that could change the future of cancer treatment. Their shoes click against marble floors that echo with the conviction of people convinced they're saving lives. And maybe they are. But not one of them notices June. She walks among them in a plain gray cardigan, a paper folder clutched close to her chest, carrying not just office errands, but a lifetime of unrealized potential. At just 24, June holds a biochemistry degree from Boston University, earned with honors, crowned by a senior thesis on targeted cancer therapies so innovative her professors still reference it. It should have been her key to the kingdom, but instead, she's delivering coffee and organizing paperwork in the shadows of those whose knowledge, on paper, exceeds hers, though rarely in reality. Yet she carries more than her unfulfilled dreams. Tucked into her bag is a worn leather journal, its pages filled with soft, intricate sketches of wildflowers. Each one a tribute to the mother she lost, to the very disease that Novalum is determined to defeat. Her drawings aren't just art. They are echoes of memories, fragments of grief, tiny prayers wrapped in petals. As the elevator glides past floor after floor of labs humming with innovation, Floor 15 for immunotherapy research, Floor 23 for clinical trials, Floor 31 for molecular biology, June quietly steps off at Floor 12, administration. Here, where the dreams of scientists become budgets and schedules, the poetry of discovery is flattened into spreadsheets and meetings. Her supervisor, Marcia Fenn, is already at her desk, her fingers moving across the keyboard like a pianist playing a symphony of cold efficiency. She doesn't look up as she barks her morning directives. The coffee station needs restocking. The 38th floor conference room needs set up before 9. And June, she adds, pausing only to adjust her glasses. Try to blend in today. We have important guests from the Shanghai delegation. Let's not give them any reason to question our professionalism. Blend in. As if she hasn't already perfected the art of invisibility. As if she hasn't mastered how to occupy space without taking any. June nods. Not because she agrees, but because in places like this, silence is often safer than resistance. But here's what no one sees. June arrives half an hour early every morning, not out of obligation, but out of devotion. In those quiet, unobserved moments, she consumes the latest oncology journals in the break room, absorbing research that most first-year PhD students struggle to decipher. She speaks English, Spanish, and Mandarin, though no one at Novalum has ever thought to ask. She's memorized the molecular structures of every compound the company has released in the past 5 years, not because it's her role, but because each one is a lifeline for someone like her mother. To June, these aren't formulas. They are fragments of hope. She listens, always listening. Her heart stutters with excitement when she overhears hallway conversations hinting at breakthroughs. Her fingers itch to contribute when she spots calculation errors on whiteboards, errors that she quietly corrects when no one's watching, because she knows that a decimal in the wrong place isn't just a mistake. It could be the difference between healing and heartbreak for thousands. June reads research articles during her lunch breaks, tucked into a corner of the cafeteria, alone but never idle. She still dares to believe, in a world that's done its best to tell her she shouldn't, that her voice matters, that her mind could change lives, that her compassion could be her greatest strength, not a liability. Marcia sees her quiet and confuses it with emptiness. She sees her kindness and mistakes it for incompetence. She sees her restraint and labels it apathy. What she doesn't see is that June's strength was forged not in boardrooms or textbooks, but in hospital rooms, sitting by her mother's side as she faded, cell by cell. June didn't just study cancer. She felt it. She lived it. Every breakthrough Novolum chases is personal to her. And 38 floors above, in a sleek corner office overlooking Boston Harbor, where ships drift across the horizon like floating promises, sits Rowan Miles. He's 38, the relentless CEO who turned Novolum into a global force. His leadership is ice and iron, driven by metrics and margins, by a ruthless need for control. They call him the Ice King, never to his face, but the nickname follows him through the glass corridors like a cold wind. What no one knows, not the interns, not the executives, not even the board, is that 3 years ago, cancer took his wife, Sarah. She had been Novolum's brightest geneticist, a woman with fire in her veins and magic in her hands, until the disease she spent her life trying to defeat took everything from her. "Is that sad?" I asked, eyeing her. Since then, Rowan has buried his grief beneath data. He fights cancer like it's a personal vendetta, but he's never once stepped foot in the lab again. And he doesn't yet know it, but somewhere 12 floors below him, a young woman with a flower-covered journal and a heart full of quiet fire is about to change everything. Sarah saw the world not in data points or protocols, but in people, in their stories, their struggles, their possibilities. To her, each sequence of DNA was a verse of poetry waiting to be understood, each patient a symphony of strength and vulnerability. And in her final moments, as the hospital lights dimmed and time bent into something slow and infinite, she whispered her final wish into Rowan's ear. "Promise me you'll keep seeing them, really seeing them, not just the symptoms or the statistics. See the people, Rowan. That's where the cure begins." But grief has a way of sanding down promises until they vanish beneath layers of duty. Rowan buried her words beneath strategy memos and regulatory filings. He wore his sorrow like armor, masking it behind the unshakable cadence of executive precision. Because it's easier to manage numbers than to face what's broken inside you. Yet memories, like dried flowers pressed between old pages, have a strange way of blooming again when the soul is ready, when the noise fades just enough for the heart to listen. Inside Rowan's office, flanked by accolades and photos from brighter days, lies a private relic. A dried white carnation wrapped in faded tissue paper. It was the last bloom Sarah ever picked from their garden, a final token of grace pressed into his hand during her last hospital stay. On the stem, a note in her delicate handwriting. "Remembrance, my love. White carnations mean remembrance. When you see them, remember. Love doesn't die, it transforms." Far below, June Halley's days pass in muted rhythm. Each morning presents a fresh chance to step into the light, but ends in the same dull gray of dismissal. Her ideas remain unheard, her brilliance overlooked by those who see her only as an extension of office logistics. In the break room one afternoon, she catches wind of a heated debate between Dr. Marcus Webb and Dr. Jennifer Chen, two senior scientists tangled in a frustrating impasse over protein synthesis. Their words ricochet through the space, binding sites, enzymatic interactions, pathways that refuse to yield. But to June, the puzzle isn't new. She faced something similar in her independent research during her mother's illness, guided by groundbreaking findings from Beijing Medical University, where an unconventional folding approach solved precisely this type of impasse. Her heart pounds, not with fear, but with that sharp-edged thrill of knowing you hold the answer in a room full of questions. She waits for a pause in the volley of words, then carefully speaks. "Excuse me, Dr. Webb, I think I read something from Shanghai that might relate to your binding issue." But before she finishes, he waves her off with a condescending smirk. "That's adorable, June, but this is graduate-level molecular biochemistry, complex stuff. Probably better to leave the science to the scientists. Maybe double-check that the coffee's fresh on the 38th. The room doesn't laugh, but the silence is worse. It wraps around her like a cold wind. June nods, not because he's right, but because pride must often bow before the fragile egos of men in lab coats. She returns to her desk, swallowing disappointment with the practiced grace of someone who's learned that silence is the armor of the unseen. Minutes later, they abandon the debate entirely, defeated by the very problem John could have solved in seconds. But the world doesn't pause for genius hidden in plain sight. Later that week, she spots a glaring error in the Henderson grant proposal. A decimal misplaced in the statistical section. What reads as a 0.3% improvement should be 3%. The difference isn't small. It's the kind of mistake that derails funding, delays treatments, and dims hope for thousands. She approaches Marcia with careful urgency, holding the document like a sacred artifact. "I think there might be a decimal error in the survival rate analysis," she says gently. Page 47. Marcia barely glances up. "June, your job is support, not statistics. Dr. Henderson's been doing this longer than you've been alive. I'm sure he knows how to count." And just like that, the ticking time bomb is dismissed. 2 weeks later, the grant is rejected. The official reason? Statistical inconsistency, an error in computation. No one connects it to June's warning. No one asks. Dr. Henderson sits in the rejection meeting, rubbing his temples, muttering, "How could we miss something like that?" 3 floors below, June prepares another tray of coffees, another silent "I told you so" filed away with the others. Every dismissal chips away at something soft and sacred in her, but somehow it also strengthens her, like steel tempered by fire. When the pain feels too heavy, she escapes to the rooftop, a forgotten garden space where weeds now thrive among rusted planters and cracked ceramic pots. It's here, in the quiet between meetings and heartbreaks, that she finds her center. She brings life back to the neglected soil, one rescued seedling at a time. She reads oncology research articles on her phone, sketches new blossoms in her mother's memory. Her journal becomes both sanctuary and science. Beauty grown from bruised ground. Surrounded by herbs clinging to life, she makes a quiet vow. "I won't disappear. I know I belong in that lab. I know I can make a difference. I just need to hold on long enough to be seen." And one day, someone finally does. Dr. Ethan Grady notices first, not because she speaks loudly, but because he listens differently. At 45, he's weathered enough of academia to know that brilliance often hides in the margins. He's seen innovation bloom from the unlikeliest places. During a staff meeting, he watches June as she scans a dense research report, not skimming, but dissecting. Her brows furrow at inconsistencies, Her eyes brighten at breakthrough data. She's not just absorbing the content. She's critiquing it, understanding it, enhancing it. And something in him stirs. While others glance through data, June sees it, like a painter seeing hidden brushstrokes in a masterpiece. Ethan notices. He sees how her pen glides across meeting handouts, scribbling notes that most postdocs couldn't piece together. Her handwriting, precise and confident, dances between equations and insights, connecting protein behaviors with clinical applications and pharmaceutical protocols with real-world implications. And when she speaks, rare, careful moments where courage peeks through hesitation, her questions slice through ambiguity with surgical precision. She's not just bright, she's burning with knowledge. One afternoon, while June is tending to the research library, dusting journals with the reverence of someone cleaning holy texts, Ethan approaches her. He doesn't loom or startle. He speaks softly, like someone reaching out to an echo that's gone unheard for too long. "I've been watching you, June," he begins, not with suspicion, but with a kind of awe. "The way you absorb presentations, the way you think. You ask questions with your eyes, even when your lips stay silent. You've got a background in biochemistry, don't you?" June looks up from the worn cover of Nature Review's Oncology. Her heart jumps, not from fear but from the disorienting experience of finally being seen. "Yes, sir, Boston University, class of 2019, but after I graduated, I took time off to care for my mom. By the time I was ready to apply for lab positions, the market had changed. The gap in my resume scared people off." She doesn't mention the rejection emails, the silence, the interviews that turned cold when she said caregiver. But Ethan hears it anyway, in her tone, in her restraint. "And your mother?" he asks gently. June swallows hard, grounding herself. "Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. I spent 14 months immersed in research, clinical trials, experimental protocols. Everything I could find. I read more oncology papers than I knew existed, learned Mandarin to access Chinese databases, studied immunotherapy models from Germany, Japan, Israel, anything to understand the disease that was taking her from me." Ethan's face changes, not just sympathy, recognition, the kind that says, "I see you now, truly. And yet here you are," he murmurs, "filing paperwork when you could be designing treatment pathways, organizing meetings instead of running them." Her eyes fill, but the tears don't fall. She's gotten good at that. "Dr. Grady, can I tell you something?" He nods. "The best researchers, they're not always the ones with the fanciest degrees or the loudest voices in meetings. They're the ones who remember that behind every number is a person, that every percentage point could mean someone's child, someone's spouse. Some of them forget that, but I can't. I won't." He hears it all, the pain, the resolve, the buried brilliance waiting for a single yes. And in that moment, June's life begins to change. But first comes the crisis. A fog-drenched Thursday morning descends on Boston with a weight that presses against the windows of Novolume's 38th floor. The boardroom is prepped for something monumental. A partnership with Chentech Industries, one of the most promising biotech giants in Shanghai. This isn't just a merger, it's a global shift. Chentech's proprietary extraction techniques rooted in traditional Chinese medicine have shown up to 40% higher bioavailability in cancer-fighting compounds. And Novellum, they bring clinical trial precision, regulatory mastery, and the global distribution system to make real change happen. Together, they could deliver hope to patients who've waited too long, too quietly, for something new. But 2 hours before the historic negotiation begins, disaster strikes. The lead translator, Dr. Sarah Martinez, calls in, her voice hoarse, her tone apologetic and pained. "I'm so sorry. I've got the worst case of food poisoning. I can't stand, let alone translate medical terminology for a full-day negotiation. Line clicks, and the panic begins. This isn't just language. Dr. Li Wei, Chentech's lead negotiator, speaks Mandarin almost exclusively, and what he doesn't say is just as important. Cultural nuance is everything. Subtext, respect, the delicate dance of saving face, of honoring ancient healing philosophy while embracing Western science. Without a fluent, medically trained, culturally competent translator, this deal will collapse. Marcia scrambles, call after call to language services, all dead ends. 2 hours notice, no one qualified before next Tuesday. Next Tuesday might as well be next century. Patients are waiting, lives are waiting. And on the 38th floor, Rowan Miles stands like a man watching his lifeboat drift away. 3 years of trust, of building bridges across continents and ideologies, all threatened by a single absence. The polished mahogany table is set. Contracts, research plans, projected outcomes, all of it trembling on the edge of being wasted. To Rowan, this deal isn't just business. It's legacy. Redemption. The fulfillment of a vow whispered to a dying woman who believed science must also have a soul. Sarah would have loved this, would have seen the poetry in blending East and West. She believed healing was more than chemistry, it was connection. And now, just hours from sealing that belief into reality, everything is unraveling. Sir, Marcia's voice breaks as she approaches, and for the first time in years, so does Rowan's composure. But deep within Novalume, someone is already stepping toward the light. Someone who speaks Mandarin fluently. Someone who understands the science and the soul of what this partnership represents. And someone who's ready, at last, to be heard. Marcia's voice trembles with something rare for her, uncertainty, as she delivers the devastating update to the room. Her usual steely resolve is cracking under the sheer weight of a moment too large for anyone to control. There's no one, sir. Every translator with the right background is either booked out of the city or not trained in pharmaceutical terminology. The best I could find is a legal translator, available tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow. The word hits the room like a hammer against glass. For Rowan Miles, it's not just a scheduling inconvenience, it's a death sentence. For someone, somewhere, because behind every dollar of funding, every line of clinical data, every promising compound, there's a patient waiting for a miracle. A mother, a son, a partner whose life might hinge on the success of this one meeting. Tomorrow, he says softly but with the weight of thunder beneath his breath, this deal doesn't make it to tomorrow. He isn't thinking about profits or press releases. He's thinking of families who won't make it another 6 months without a breakthrough. He's thinking of the 3,000 people who will die today in the United States from cancer. He's thinking of Sarah and the white carnation she left behind. The room falls into silence. Not the calm kind. The devastating kind. The kind that comes when you realize there might not be a way forward. Around the polished table, high-ranking executives and board members stare at the documents they can no longer read. Symbols without meaning, hope without a voice. Outside, in the hallway, June stands frozen. She had come to deliver coffee and pastries, a routine task in her routine invisibility. But through the cracked door, she hears everything, every word of the looming disaster, every tremor in Marcia's voice, every exhausted sigh from the boardroom. She listens, and then she feels it. An old familiar urgency rise up in her chest. That same pulse that once kept her reading Chinese medical journals long into the night, searching for something, anything, to save her mother. And she realizes, they need me. Not just someone who speaks Mandarin. Someone who understands its nuance. its tone, its weight. Someone who grasps the science and the spirit behind the partnership, the medicine and the meaning. Someone who didn't just learn Chinese from a classroom, but from desperation, from love. But then fear crashes in, the kind that sits in your bones and whispers that you'll never be enough. Her fingers tighten on the coffee cart's handle. She takes one step forward and stops. What if they laugh? What if she fails? What if she risks everything, only to prove everyone who's dismissed her right, that she's just a background player in a world that doesn't have room for quiet brilliance? The pressure is crushing, the weight of her dreams pressing against the wall of her fear. And then, like light cutting through fog, she hears it. Her mother's voice, soft, steady, the one voice that always brought her back from the edge. Sweetheart, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act because something else matters more. And right now, everything matters more. June takes another step, then another, each one a rebellion against the years of invisibility, against the quiet cruelty of being underestimated. Inside, Rowan stands at the window, gazing out at the mist-wrapped skyline. His reflection is the only thing left clear. Behind him, his board is unraveling. Hope is evaporating. And June, she is standing at the edge of everything. Her fears, her potential, her purpose. Ready to risk it all. The door to the conference room looms before her, half open, like an invitation from the universe, or a test. She exhales, long, slow, and remembers Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman from the oncology ward who once took June's hand in the hospital waiting room and whispered, "I'd give anything for one more year with my boy. One more month, even a week, just enough time for a miracle." That was what this meeting could mean for people like Mrs. Patterson, for the kids in the pediatric wing, for her mother, whose final days were filled with pain and dignity and the hope that June might someday help someone else's family find a different ending. She closes her eyes. This is that day, as the clock ticks toward 10 o'clock IEM. Every second seems to stretch like a lifetime. Each tick is another chance slipping away, another potential breakthrough dissolving into regret. Inside the room, Rowan paces like a caged wolf. His team suggests rescheduling, but he knows better. This isn't just a logistical failure. This is a cultural insult, a breach of trust that could shatter 3 years of careful diplomacy. The Chinese delegation won't interpret this as bad luck. They'll see it as indifference, as disrespect, and that might be unforgivable. The partnership isn't just about funding. It's about bridging two worlds, East and West, old wisdom and new technology, philosophy and pharmaceuticals. Sarah believed in that kind of collaboration, and now her vision is hanging by a thread. Meanwhile, June is battling every voice in her head, telling her to step back into the shadows, to let this moment pass her by like all the others, to retreat to the safety of unimportance. But her mother didn't raise her to play small. She told her to try, even when failure felt certain, especially then. And now, as hope begins to die in that conference room, June Halley, the invisible girl with the mind of a scientist and the heart of a warrior, places her hand on the doorknob. Everything hangs in the balance. Not just a meeting, not just a deal, but a future. And she's about to step into it. June thinks of Mrs. Patterson, her frail voice still echoing in her memory. "I'd give anything for just one more breakthrough, one more clinical trial, one more chance to watch my grandchildren grow up." And in that moment, June isn't just standing in a hallway outside a corporate boardroom. She is standing at the intersection of everything she's sacrificed and everything she believes in. She's holding the weight of thousands of lives, strangers whose names she'll never know, faces she'll never see, but whose futures are tied to this very moment. She remembers all the nights she spent poring over Chinese research papers in the glow of sterile hospital lights. The countless hours she translated not just words, but meaning, so that maybe, just maybe, she could find something no one else had. She thinks of all the times she stayed silent when she had the answer, all the times she swallowed her voice to avoid being seen as presumptuous, every moment she sat at the edge of her own potential, too afraid to leap. But then, she sees her mother. Not in the final days, gaunt and fading, but in the light of her strength. The woman who believed in small kindnesses. The woman who told her one sleepless night, "The things that scare you most are often the things the world needs you to do the most." June's breathing deepens, steadies. Her clarity returns, like sunrise over a quiet city. This isn't about prestige. This isn't about being impressive. This is about service. The kind her mother gave when she held the trembling hands of dying patients. The kind June gave to every plant she rescued from that rooftop. The kind that requires no recognition, just courage. And so, with a resolve that feels larger than herself, she pushes the door open. "Excuse me," she says softly. And somehow, that one quiet phrase slices through the air like a trumpet blast. The room turns in unison. Board members, executives, scientists, and at the center, Rowan Miles. Their eyes meet, and for the first time, he truly sees her. Not as the background, not as the assistant, but as the answer. Marcia opens her mouth, automatic instinct rising in her throat, an urge to protect structure and hierarchy. But June's voice holds steady, unwavering. "I know about the translation issue," she says. "I speak fluent Mandarin. I also hold a biochemistry degree. I'm familiar with molecular biology, clinical research, regulatory standards, and I understand both the cultural and philosophical underpinnings of traditional Chinese medicine." There's a long, stunned silence. Dr. Kellerman's eyes blink slowly, as if recalibrating everything she thought she knew. Even Marcia, so sure of her worldview, can't seem to find her words. And Rowan? He leans forward. His voice, low and weighted, carries the gravity of a man who has just caught a glimpse of hope he thought lost. "You speak Mandarin. At what level?" June's confidence builds, slow but powerful, like sunrise through mist. "Fluent, both conversational and technical. I taught myself while researching international clinical trials during my mother's battle with leukemia. I needed access to data from Shanghai Medical University, Beijing Cancer Institute, and the traditional Chinese Medicine Research Center." She pauses, then adds gently, "And I didn't just learn the language. I studied the cultural philosophy behind their approach to medicine, the belief systems, the values, the healing frameworks." Rowan studies her like a man peering into an undiscovered galaxy. "And you're comfortable with pharmaceutical language, clinical terminology?" "I know our compounds. I've memorized our protocols. I understand the FDA process and the Chinese equivalent. I can translate not just the words, but the intentions, the nuance that determines whether this deal succeeds or fails." The room feels suspended. Outside, Boston hums as usual. Traffic flowing, lives moving forward, but in this room, the world has narrowed to the breath before a leap. And Rowan slowly, carefully nods. "Show me," he says. He turns his laptop toward her. On the screen, dense molecular diagrams, chemical structures, pages of specialized pharmacology and regulatory jargon. "This," he says, "is our lead compound's technical brief. Translate it, but more than that, explain it as you would to someone from Chantec, someone grounded in Chinese medical traditions." June's hands tremble, not with fear, with readiness. She steps forward and begins. First, she reads. Once, twice. Then she closes her eyes for a brief second and opens them with a calm that comes from something deeper than courage, conviction. She begins to speak, not just in Mandarin, but in meaning. The words flow from her lips like water over ancient stone, fluent, nuanced, graceful. But more than that, her translation is not just precise, it is empathetic. She reinterprets Novalume's cutting-edge molecular design through the lens of Chinese philosophy, describing the therapy's ability to restore balance at the cellular level. Its targeting of root disruption, not just surface symptoms, aligning with concepts of energy flow, organ interdependence, and long-term equilibrium. She uses metaphors familiar to the Chinese medical framework. She bridges worlds. And when she finishes, silence, absolute silence. Then Kellerman exhales, slow and stunned. She had lived in Beijing for 2 years. She had studied Mandarin, but she has never heard it used like this, like a bridge, not just a translation. Rowan's expression shifts from surprise to awe. And somewhere behind June, Marcia lowers her eyes, not in shame, but in the quiet reckoning of a woman realizing that greatness had been blooming under her nose all along. That was, Dr. Kellerman whispers, her voice trembling with wonder. That was extraordinary. She isn't exaggerating. It wasn't just accurate, she continues, her eyes never leaving June. It was elegant, precise. You didn't just translate the science, you translated the soul of what we're trying to do. Rowan says nothing at first. He just watches June, as if someone's peeled away a veil he hadn't even realized he was looking through. Where once stood an invisible assistant, now stands a woman of vision, one who had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal the full depth of her gifts. He clears his throat. The call starts in 35 minutes, he says, his tone shifted, no longer cold, no longer formal. There is respect in it now, something warmer, something real. He meets her gaze. June, would you be willing to represent Novalume as our lead translator and cultural liaison for this partnership? She feels the words ripple through her chest, like waves breaking against the shores of long-buried dreams. This isn't just about language, he adds. You'd be facilitating communications that could determine the future of cancer treatment for millions. Her hands tremble slightly, but her spine straightens. Her world has just shifted on its axis, realigning around the truth that has always lived inside her. She belongs here. She nods, her voice soft but unshakable. Yes, sir, I'd be honored. Not just for Novalume, for every patient still waiting. When the video call begins, June sits at the head of the table, the very same seat she once passed silently with coffee in hand. Now she's surrounded by board members who minutes ago didn't even know her name. The air feels different, no longer thick with panic, but alive with cautious hope. As the Chinese executives appear on screen, their expressions are formal, unreadable. June takes a breath and leans forward. Honored colleagues, she begins in Mandarin, her tone composed and reverent. It is my privilege to facilitate today's dialogue between Novalume Pharmaceuticals and Chentech Industries. Across the screen, Dr. Li Wei's eyes widen. His expression warms, ever so slightly, as he replies rapidly, testing her. June listens, processes, and responds with seamless fluency. It becomes clear within minutes that this is no ordinary interpreter. She is not just translating words. She is building bridges. She explains Novalume's technology with metaphors that resonate with traditional Chinese medicine. She anticipates hesitations and answers them with wisdom drawn from both Western science and Eastern philosophy. When concerns arise about regulatory delays, she reframes them as shared commitments to patient safety, an ideal sacred in both cultures. Dr. Grady watches from the back, eyes glistening with pride. But the true test arrives 2 hours in. Mr. Chen, Genentech's lead negotiator, poses a question so complex it silences the room. A nuanced inquiry about compound stability through the lens of traditional Chinese medical harmony. The Novolume scientists exchange uncertain glances. June steps in. He's asking, she says calmly, whether our targeted treatment approach risks disrupting systemic balance the way traditional Chinese medicine warns against overly aggressive interventions. Better check the surface. And then, in Mandarin, she answers. But not just scientifically, she speaks to the heart of the matter. She explains how Novolum's therapy doesn't overpower the body, but partners with it. How their method mirrors the Eastern principle of supporting internal defenses rather than bulldozing them. She brings East and West into alignment. When she finishes, Mr. Chen smiles, not politely but sincerely. "As you, June," he says in careful English, his accent thick but his meaning crystalline. "Your understanding honors both our languages and our sciences." 4 hours later, the agreement is signed. The impossible deal, the one hanging by a thread, is real. Around her, executives celebrate with quiet intensity. Laughter that didn't seem possible hours ago now fills the space. But Rowan remains seated, watching her, seeing her. Finally, "June," he says, his voice different now. "May I speak with you, privately?" In his sun-filled office, overlooking Boston Harbor, he takes a breath she senses has waited years to be spoken. 3 years ago, I lost my wife to leukemia," he says, eyes locked on hers. "Sarah, she had a gift. She saw potential in people even when they couldn't see it in themselves." He opens his drawer. Inside, wrapped in soft tissue, rests a dried white carnation. "She gave me this before she passed. Said white carnations meant remembrance, that love never dies, it transforms." June's breath catches. "I left a flower on your desk," she whispers. "I wasn't seeking attention. I just wanted to remind you that even in grief, there's beauty. My mother taught me that." He nods slowly. "I should have seen you," he says, quietly. "And I didn't until today." He straightens. "I'd like to offer you a role, Associate Research Coordinator. You'll work directly with Dr. Grady on international partnerships. $78,000, 0 cents salary, full research credit, and publication opportunities. June, your voice matters here. It always did, I just wasn't wise enough to hear it." Tears shimmer in her eyes, but she doesn't blink them away. "I accept," she says, "not just for me, but for every patient still hoping for a miracle, for every voice that's gone unheard." 9 months later, June walks through Novolume's halls, no longer invisible. She wears her lab coat with pride, her eyes brighter, her stride more confident. She's returned from Shanghai, where her work helped accelerate life-saving treatments and launch a cultural exchange program now recognized by the World Health Organization. But her proudest achievement? The letters from patients, from parents, from survivors. Each one a testimony that her courage mattered. In the elevator, Marcia steps in beside her. "I owe you an apology," she says, sincere. "You changed how I see people, June. How I see potential." June smiles, kind but honest. "We all see what we're ready to see, Marcia. Sometimes it just takes time." From her new office window, she watches the rooftop garden she's restored. A once-forgotten space, now blooming with white carnations for her mother, red roses for Sarah, and purple irises for every patient they fight for. Dr. Grady joins her one morning, coffee in hand. "You know," He says, every company has its Junes. Quiet people with loud brilliance. The question is, are we wise enough to see them? Ah, she nods. Somewhere below, in the early morning bustle of Boston, another dreamer files paperwork, serves coffee, waits for their moment. But June Halley's story has already taken root. It began with a single flower and blossomed into a movement. Because the most extraordinary lives often wear the most ordinary clothes. If you've ever felt unseen, underestimated, or silenced, know this. Your moment is coming. The world needs what only you can offer. And when the moment arrives, when the door stands open, may you have the courage to step through. Because someone out there is waiting on the miracle only you can bring. Don't keep them waiting too long.